2021, and this is the Arlington County, Virginia Board of Equalization hearings. There are 4 cases on the agenda. The first case is RPC 20010-026, the property located at 535 North Pollard Street. We have Mr. Blake Warren representing the owner. Mr. Warren, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
Thank you, board. I'll direct you all to page 38 of 103, which again is our summary of facts. This is the Birchwood Apartments. It's consistent of 1 RPC. It is currently assessed, or I should say, it was initially assessed at $39,053,800, which is $402,000 a unit. The county is recommending a value following our first level appeal filing and board level appeal filing of $38,787,200, and the value we're requesting from the board today is $32,002,900. Birchwood is a garden style apartment that was originally built in 1982. It houses only 97 units and offers a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. It is located approximately 4 blocks from the Virginia Square and 6 blocks from the Ballston metro stations. The county is utilizing the effective age of the property of 2005 and classifies it currently as mid-rise in their income approach to follow. I'll direct the board again to page 3 of the county's response and memo to the board. You'll find the apartment income and expense summary. You'll see in column D, which is the original assessment, and column F, which is their revision, that their test column, they've slightly revised their gross potential income down just $10,000 from $3,255,000 to $245,000. However, the actual gross potential income that was reported at the property, as you can see in column E, was $3,238,000. Now, following, and then if you go further down here, you'll see that this property was relatively stable with regard to vacancy. The county was initially applying and is still applying their 6% market vacancy for mid-rise. You'll see that the actual vacancy, just vacancy, increased about 5% from 1% to 6.36%, and concessions was about 2%, so 8.5% total for vacancy and collection loss in, you'll see in column E that was reported in 2020 in comparison to what it had historically been reported at, which is closer to 4 to 5% in prior years. Move down to effective gross income, and the county's initial estimate of EGI was $3,060,000. Again, with the revision to gross potential income, that changed and only went down slightly to $350,000. That's a $10,000 decrease in total effective gross income, where you'll see that the actuals decreased substantially more than that. From 2019, prior to COVID, at $3,170,000 for the effective gross income, decreased to $2,961,480, which is a decrease of approximately 6.5%. So again, we don't think the county's test column accurately reflects the most recent reporting year and considerations for COVID. The total operating expenses, again, this has been a fairly stabilized property dating back the last 3 years. Starting in 2018, the property had operating expenses of 33%, a little over $1 million. In 2018 to 2019 of 32%, $1,018,000, and then most recently $1,011,000, 703, which is 34% of effective gross income. The county's initial valuation used a operating expense ratio of 33%. That increased just slightly by 0.25% to 33.25% in their test column. So again, we don't think they're accurately reflecting the cost, and that has more to do with the effective gross income and what we don't believe the county is appropriately considering the effect of COVID and the lost revenue in 2020. Also important to consider is the actual the current assessment value from 2020 or from 2021, excuse me, represents a 1% decrease from the prior year. However, the actual NOI you'll see is actually down 8% year over year from 19 to 20. So again, we don't think that this value as of the 1/1/2021 valuation date has given enough consideration to the hardships that this property experienced in 2020 during COVID, and specifically to the effective gross income and the operating expenses. And we would ask the board to consider to give additional consideration to those aspects of the property and how it's currently being valued. Jeremy, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on.
Just that the original assessment that was done, I think they did a pretty good job seeing the 3-year average. Then they learned that the income was down $200,000, 9.4%, and with that information dropped the NOI by $14,000. So they had the original numbers and then said, wait, things are down $200,000. I'll give you a $14,000 off. Which, looking at the numbers on this page 3, obviously missed the mark quite a bit. So that's all I have. Sophie Mao's on the phone as well. From Ditmar, if you all have any direct questions for us and the owner, she can help out. And Sophie, I don't know if anything you want to add on this.
Yeah, Jeremy, Sophie and I are both here. This is Greg Raines with Ditmar. No, just that property struggled heavily and continued through now. I mean, that property has had a significant vacancy and concession issues. So I mean that reduction in our NOI is what we'll see plus some this year. So I don't know how we're way over that with the revision.
The revision's expecting a $100,000 rebound, which we already know is not happening. It's getting worse, not better. I think that's it for petitioner.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bailey, I believe that you are going to present Mr. Cheekas's case.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good morning, board. So this is the Birchwood Apartments. We've had this property come before the board in years past, where the discussion was around the property type classification. In the past, we dived deep into the history of this property, and we've proven to the board why it's been classified as a mid-rise. That's due to the addition that was done in 2000, and then years later, they demoed the 3-story garden and built another mid-rise property. That's why it's classified as a 4-story mid-rise. The effective age was reduced a few years back to account for the 2 different years in which the property underwent renovation or new construction. For this property, Mr. Cheekas made revisions to his revenue based off the information that he received. He also made revisions, a downward revision on the parking revenue and the other revenue. It resulted in a small decrease in the GPI. We applied our 6% vacancy to this property, which is in line with how we value other mid-rise properties. The operating expenses were increased from $10,411 per unit to $10,457 per unit. The NOI decreased slightly, and we applied the 5.25% cap rate, which resulted in a revision. The original assessment projected about $100,000 less than the 2019's NOI, and then on the 21 revision, we reduced it a little bit further. As the board knows, we don't just take the I&E that's supplied to us and apply a cap rate. We look at the history of the property. You can see from 18 to 19, the NOI increased. I think on here it's about 6.8%. Again, we used the lower NOI. We achieved the lower NOI in the original assessment than the 2019 numbers. Yes, due to higher vacancy than in the past, the property did experience a downward turn in the NOI. I think it's about 9.39%. We followed the history of the property during our assessment process. That's why we also applied the 6% vacancy instead of 8.54% that the agent is using, because we're sticking with the guidelines that we have and making adjustments where we can. The revised assessment that we're proposing is about a 1.75% decrease from the 2020 assessment. And we believe that the board should take up that number. That's all we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Lawson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is for the county. And this is going to be applicable, I think, in all 4 cases. The cap rate assumes a 0.2% replacement. Why wouldn't a property owner be free to choose a different amount of reserve?
So our 0.2% doesn't limit the property owner to what they can choose for reserve. What we're saying is that based off the information we received, this is what we would apply to all property types.
Let me ask the applicant, you all are adding to this particular case $20,000 reserve. Is that a fictitious number, or is that money that's actually being carried over into the next year?
That's the actual replacement reserve that was reported on the most recent 2021, which shows the most recent calendar year 2020 income and expense that was submitted. So that was submitted and signed by the ownership.
It's for the apples to apples comparison. The cap rate that they're using is the 5.25. You would take 20 basis points off of that to get to a 5.05 when you remove the reserve. So then the tax rate comes off of that. So that's essentially a four cap.
If there's a 0.2 assumption of reserves, and you're also counting 20, aren't we double counting?
If you were to believe that the base cap rate for the property is a 4, then yes. We don't feel the cap rate of a base of a 4 would be appropriate for this asset, and Greg can expand on that if you'd like. So our cap rate is basically a market cap rate, and then we take reserves, since market cap rates don't apply a fictitious 0.2% to them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Mr. Matzkin, unfortunately, you came in late, so you can't participate in this case. You can join us for the second case. Any other questions? Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, on the if you look at the I guess the plat on this property, it looks like there's a single family lot behind it that's included in the parcel. Is that being assessed as well? On Piedmont Street.
Are you on a page on the packet? Or are you just looking at the outside plat?
I'm just looking at the map, that's all. County map.
Is that question for me or the appellant?
Maybe Greg or Sophie can explain kind of what the purpose of that lot is. Is that just for FAR calculation? What is that? Or does that have some sort of use? Is there a renter on there?
Greg or Sophie, you're on mute if you are responding.
So I'm sorry, we do, there is a single family lot that we own that's adjacent to the property. I would ask Jeremy or Blake to, if it's, I believe that's assessed separately, but I don't know that, Jeremy.
I thought it was. This assessment doesn't consider, I don't believe, and again, I'll defer to Irving, but I don't believe the assessment includes anything for a single family lot.
Mr. Bailey, do you want to address that?
The house is on an individual parcel and is valued as a single family home.
Okay, thank you. Any final questions?
I'm looking at the map, and it's one of those things that look kind of odd.
Mhm.
I didn't know if it was being addressed here.
No, I mean, if you know anybody that's got another adjacent parcel, we'd love to talk to them, because we can get some other units on that lot, on that property, if we can get a couple more lots. But
I got you. Okay.
Okay. All right, with no further questions, Mr. Bailey, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Okay. The property was tested and it resulted in a lower NOI. We applied our 6% vacancy to this property, which is in line with how we valued all other mid-rise properties. The result was a decreased value of $38,787,200, and we ask that the board accepts that proposed revision. And that's all we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Warren, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes. Again, following the test revision in the column, they saw that 2020 income was down from 2019. Their test column in column F revised the income just slightly down $10,000. You've heard Greg with Ditmar testify to the fact that this property with COVID and the aftermath of that is going to continue that downward trend. When you see the revised NOI of the county, and it's still, again, being right around $100,000 over, what we see from a lot of the county is they take the average of the last 3 years, and if they're somewhere in the mix there, they think that satisfies the test column. Normally, if it was a stabilized property with multiple years of stabilization, that might work. But as we've seen with COVID, the year following, and what we've seen with Greg speak to with the future of these and concessions expected income going to continue to trend downwards, I think you got to look outside of just that 3-year average and see where this property is headed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's just among the board members. What's everybody think? Mr. Lawson.
Yes. First of all, I wanted to address the cap rate, which is based upon the classification of this particular property. And in the past, I've argued that it should be a garden apartment, but at this point, that's a thing decided. And so I think we have to go with the classification as a mid-rise. To me, after looking at this ahead of time and then listening to the presentation, I think the only question I have, and I would like to see what others on the committee think, the only question I have is, should we go with the operating year or the revision?
Okay, I'll just say I too thought when I looked at the revision, I thought the revision didn't go quite low enough. So, based on the operating year, I don't think I would go as far as the appellant's number, but I'm curious what other people think. Mr. Hoffman?
Yeah, I'm in the same school of thought. I think we're on the same track there, using column E, at least for this year, and then taking another look every year, as we probably will for this property. But the cap rate in 19, we actually classified this as a garden, but then the county's guidelines were further clarified, and kind of that clear line was drawn at 4 stories. So that's why this is now a mid-rise. So I'm on board with Barnes and Mary's suggestion, using the county's cap rate for mid-rise.
Yes, you are muted, Mary, but let me.
I'm sorry. I keep calling on you. I didn't understand why you weren't speaking. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, to be honest, when I looked at the case, I did the same as with previous apartment complexes that we've seen. I don't really think that these apartments that are managed by Ditmar are struggling like we've heard. looking at what they have and what they offer. I'm just looking at, so far, they only have like 3 apartments available coming up, 2 in October, 1 in September. To me, the original assessment was fine, but I'm willing to accept the revised. I don't really see how or why we have to make any changes based on just 1 year. I know that 2020 was lower than the previous ones, but I think looking overall at the NOI, the EGI, GPI, I think everything is lower than what it's been. So I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the revised. I don't see why we need to make any further changes.
All right, Mr. Yates?
I'm okay. I was okay with the revised. I think the county has met the requirements for, equalization with other properties and how they approach this. I see that, there's slight differences, but that's common on all projects or all properties. I think we, instead of projecting forward what's going to happen next year or with this as this goes, I think the revision's adequate.
All right, and I believe Miss Hogan has been knocked off. So is she here? I don't see her. She just texted me and said she's trying to get back in. Yeah, the issue, like I said, I think based on having the Columnese information, the building is pretty stable, but I mean, it goes up and down, up and down. It's not going down a ton, but I think it's less than what the revision is. But, the way I see the count is it's 3 to 3, and it would tie and go back to the original assessment, which I don't think any of us want to do that. So for at least to get the revised number, if we can't, get enough votes to do the lower, because I thought the 37, I capped out the operating at 5 1/4 at 37,138.6, which I think is better. But if there's not enough consensus for that, then I certainly will go with the revision. Mr. Hoffman?
Yeah, I had the same number as you, and kind of thinking of it as we reduced in 19 and we were right about 38, and definitely 2020 was a more difficult period, and how this building recovers in the face of the challenges it has, plus the fact that there's just a ton of new apartments online in Boston that it's going up against that are newer and amenitized. And those buildings, you walk in there today and they're going to offer you 2 or 3 months free rent to move in. So I think that's kind of what they're dealing with in the competition, and that might take a few years to shake out. So that's kind of where I think the headwinds are coming from.
Mr. Penaranda?
The thing is that I don't see that. I don't see that they're even offering 1 month of free rent on this apartment building. I'm just looking at what they have advertised, what they have on their website, and like I said, they only have 2 apartments coming up in October 17, October 22nd, 1 in September, on September 17th, but there's nothing else available.
Right, and that's all well and good, but that's as of right now, August 3rd.
Right.
I mean, unfortunately, we don't know what it was January 1st, but we do know what the operating income was. So again, I mean, since we do it year to year, I don't know. I feel comfortable with reducing it, but
yeah, they had 10% vacancy on January 1st if you go through their rent roll.
So, but if we can't move Mr. Yates or Mr. Penaranda,
I am on the fence with it. I don't think it is a difference. And we don't always give the appellants, we want them to prove it as opposed to just a benefit of the doubt. I don't want to see it revert back to the original assessment. I will vote with you, or with the
with a 37 million.
Yes.
Okay. All right, will someone like to make the motion, or you, Mr. Hoffman?
Sure, I'll motion reduce assessment to 37,138,600 based on the operating year 2020 NOI.
I'll second.
Okay, so that is Mr. Hoffman and second by Mr. Lawson. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Mr. Penrose. Okay. So it is 5-1. The assessment is reduced to 37,138,600, and that is based on the actual operating year's income, column E, at the county cap rate of 5.25. Thank you. Okay. Moving along to the second case on the agenda, we still have all the same players here. RPC 14041-187, property located at 3807 Wilson Boulevard. Mr. Warren, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
Yes, thank you. I'll direct the board for this one to page 43 of 112 of the county's response memo. This is our summary of facts. This property is the Amelia. It is consistent of one tax RPC. It was originally assessed at $44,359,200, which is 400 almost 11,000 a unit. The county is recommending a revision of $42,799,400, and the value we're requesting from the board today is $39,444,600, which is 365,000 unit. The property is a high-rise, originally constructed in 2009, and is 8 stories high. Houses 108 units and a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. If you turn to page 3, we'll find our income and expense summary sheet. Again, this property, as well prior to COVID, has been, for the most part, fairly consistent. The county's revision you'll see in columns F1 and F2, and it splits out the apartment and commercial income. This is one, again, where you'll see that the total vacancy and collection loss that was reported in each of the 3 prior years, 2020, was fairly consistent at 4.5%. In 2017, 4.16%. In 2018, 5%. In 2019, and then most recently you see it jump up to 8% in 2020. The county, in their initial assessment, is using 5% for the high rise. That doesn't change in their test column, which again you're seeing those effects reflected in the effective gross income, which in 2017 was at $3,029,000, dropped down slightly to $3,023,000 in 2018, $3,179,000 in 2019, and then you see it drop to $3,072,000 in 2020. The counties, after their revision, EGI is $3,097,057, which is $24,000 higher. So again, one that we don't think is following COVID is being enough consideration for the actual vacancy and concession loss that was reported at the subject property. The same with the operating expenses. This is a property that has been fairly stable over the last couple of years. The last 3 years, operating expenses was 24% in 2018, 26% in 2019, and then again 26% in 2020. The county, upon their revision and seeing the 2020 financials, actually decreased their total operating expenses from 26.2, which was right in line with the actual reporting year, and dropped it down to 25.85%. Another thing to point out here is with regard to the county's valuation and test column of the retail portion of this assessment. You'll see in column D2 that their initial estimate of NOI was $159,440, and following the submission of the 2020 financials, which showed a much lower total NOI that was reported of just 119,000. The county revised their test column F2 up from 159,440 to 176,144. Because of COVID, the ownership had to offer 3 months of abatement. There was a significant decrease in total revenue from 19 to 20 because of that. But the county is adjusting the actual retail or commercial income up in their 2020 estimate or their 2021 estimate following COVID and loss of total revenue from abatements that had to be offered for these tenants. Those are the two main things is with regard to the operating expenses. And again, the county's consideration in their test column following the submission of the 2020 financials. Jeremy, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yes. If you feel there's any inconsistencies with what we're showing here, the income and statements or rent rolls versus the website, for example, please let us know in questions so we can address those. Obviously, we didn't have that opportunity last time, and Greg wants to talk about that quickly. Greg, do you want to speak to why the website's showing less vacancy than what the rent rolls might?
Yeah, I just think in general, as we go through these, and I'm sure everybody's in the same boat. I mean, we had, we're anywhere from 10 to 20% vacancy, honestly, in most of our properties in the winter. And so, our ownership's very concerned about maintenance of false rents in exchange for vacancy. So we're very occupancy driven. We rented specifically at Birchwood many units at $600 to $800 lower than what we would consider market rent in the RB corridor. To Greg's point, we're chasing amenitized buildings that are leasing up. That's going to be the case this year. It's not like there's not deliveries happening right now. So I would be hesitant to look at what's currently available because there were so many gives for the last year to get to those 3 units being available. So that's not a real reflection of our performance or our current situation.
And you're going to see that in next year's gross potential rents are going to be down dramatically because and the rent roll rents are going to be down dramatically.
Right. And then I would also mind you that whenever you have those low rents that are offered to maintain some level of occupancy, when you get to, like Greg said, a rent increase situation at a renewal period, you can't do $1,000 rent increase because the renter did not qualify on that level. And so now you're gradually moving things up. So that's a 5-year process to get rent rolls back to where they were. So the websites are not what the defining factor is when we look at our performance this year.
The last point is the assessor in the last few years have used a 4% market vacancy for, a 4% vacancy rent loss and concessions for retail. COVID hit, properties were required to shut down for months, and they've looked at the numbers, and after the fact, they've determined that the correct rent loss and vacancy rate is still 4%. Absolutely no impact on retail. It's not a big number, it's not a big factor here, but just pure common sense. I think we all realize that retail is not as strong as it was last March. I really don't think there's any debate on that, but the county has taken the position that it's really, in regards to vacancy and concessions, it's the same. And actually, in this situation, it's actually a lot better than it was prior. Despite that the retail brought in 142,000, they think it should now bring in 221,000, which is just inaccurate. I'm sorry, 211,000, which is inaccurate. So that's all I have. And if you have any questions regarding what you see on the site or anything, please let us know in questions. Because I'm not allowed to talk when you guys are deliberating, which is why I mute myself so I don't get slapped on the wrist.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Bailey for the county, please.
This is the Amelia apartment. I think really just to get down to the case, the biggest difference is going to be the commercial revenue. So as pointed out, the property owners reported $142,694 in retail revenue. Sorry, let me slow down. So the county in the test and in the original assessment used a higher retail value projection of $190,900, which was pointed out by the agent. If you go to page 60 of the packet, let's see, 60. It's going to page 60 of the packet. You'll see that the rent roll reports the retail rent for the tenant, which is Mattress Warehouse. That is where the county got their retail rent rate from when they did the retail analysis. The space is 4,150 square feet. On this page, I'm sorry, I think it's actually it's page 60 of 71 of the appellants, page 100 of 112 of the whole packet, sorry. So on this page, you will see the scheduled monthly charges. You also see the scheduled monthly other charges. So that number coincides what was calculated by Mr. Chikas on the rent roll analysis on page 6. Again, on page 6, you see that Mattress Warehouse is suite 3807, 4,150 square feet. It shows the base rent per square foot calculation based off the annualized rent. What we look at is the potential gross income for this space. Potential gross income is determined by the rent rate that is charged. Mr. Warren indicated there was 3 months of rent abatement given to this tenant. There's nothing in the packet about this rent abatement that I saw. There's nothing in the packet about the rent abatement that Mr. Chikas made note of, and it never came up in the discussion that we had for this case. So I can't speak to the 3 months rent abatement that they were given. What I can speak to is the rent rate that was derived from the rent roll that they provided to us. The same way we value other general commercial properties, we take this potential rent income, and we also took the potential pass-through income that came from the rent roll, and we applied the 4% vacancy. After the 4% vacancy, we applied a 13% expenses and came up with our retail value. Based off of adjustments Mr. Chikas made to the apartment revenue, he reduced the apartment revenue about a little over 100,000 when you look at the revision column compared to the original assessment. The GPI on the apartment side was decreased by about $150,000 from the original assessment to the revised number. We applied the 5% vacancy rate. When you look at the history of the property, it has been pretty stabilized. Total vacancy and collection has been less than 4.5% for the past, for the first 3 years, 2017, 18, 19. It did increase slightly in 2020. Again, if you compare our GPI, and we're looking at total GPI compared to what they submitted on the income statements. They don't divide out the income statements with apartment on one form and commercial on a separate form. They combine everything together. But if you look at the GPI and the test, we are about 100,000, almost 100,000 less than what they reported for 2020. Our EGI is just shy of $25,000. As far as the expenses, when you look at the 3-year average of expenses, the property's average expense has been around $785,000. When you look at the EGI, not EGI, NOI, we reduced that about $80,000 based off of the information that we received. We're 30,000 higher than what they reported for 2020. We're substantially lower than what they reported in 2017, 18, and 19. One thing to point out, again, with the retail, our number, again, is based off of the rent rate that they provided to us. The actual 142,694 that they're reporting it has to be an actual number because it's 33% less than what they would achieve based off the rent rate alone. The gross potential for retail is $190,000. They're reporting about $47,200 less than what the gross potential actually is in the I&E statement. So that 142 has to be net of any vacancy or rent loss in the first place. So on their pro forma, they're taking the 142,694, which is actual net number, and then still applying the 4% vacancy to that. We don't believe that's appropriate because they're already factoring in any kind of rent loss for that property, that retail space that is. So based off of the information that Mr. Cheek received, he proposed to revise the assessment from $44,359,200 to $42,799,400. We ask that the board accept this proposed value, and that is all we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Questions from board members? Mr. Hoffman.
For the appellant, yeah, if you don't mind sharing, or maybe you want to just kind of generalize, but what kind of term is left on that retail lease?
Greg,
hold on, yeah, hold on. I'm looking. I was just looking at it. I'm bringing it back up.
I could tell you that Chris sent us an email and he asked if the drop of revenue was rent deferrals, and we responded, no, it's an abatement. And here's the amendment to the lease, which we sent him on 7/15. The lease was, Greg, I mean, I'm reading your text. Why don't you just tell him what happened?
To answer Greg's question, it ends in October of 24. The lease with Mattress Warehouse. We provided a rent abatement for April, May, and June of 2020, 3 months.
The corporate closed all of their stores, so it wasn't just this location.
Yeah, they reached out to us and said we're not paying rent. None of our locations are paying. It's like 190 Mattress Warehouse stores. We're not paying rent for the next 3 months.
And we sent that abatement to Chris on 7/15 after he requested it.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Hoffman again.
Another one for the county. I mean, this is kind of in no man's land between Virginia Square and Boston. So would you consider this the Virginia Square retail market or the Boston retail market? For the county.
From a apartment standpoint, I mean, we really don't break it up much like that. We look at proximity to metro. We don't really stratify it too much as far as what we apply from terms of market guidelines by market. It's in the RB corridor. That's what we look at.
Okay.
Okay, any final? No? Okay, Mr. Warren, if you take a minute, or I'm sorry, Mr. Bailey, if you would take a minute to wrap up.
Thank you. Again, just looking through the packet, I don't see an email correspondence. So from my information that I have, there's no discussion about the rent abatement. Mr. Chitlick has firsthand account, so if he says that was the case, then I'll take him for his word. The gross potential income, though, is what we go off of, and that's provided based off information in the rent roll. So that's how we calculate the $190,000 per year for this retail space. Again, the INE is reporting net income. They're reporting what they actually receive, so they're already discounting any rent loss or vacancy assumptions. So in the pro forma, to take the 142 and then apply the 4% is inappropriate because that's already been deducted in what they reported. Mr. Chikas resulted in a value of $42,799,400. That's what we're proposing to the board, and that is all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Warren, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yeah, as Jeremy previously just stated, I was in discussions with Chris. He had asked back on the 7th, or the 7th, what was the drop in revenue of 17.5% in 2020? Was it rent deferrals or abatements? And we responded on the 15th with the actual Second Amendment clause for that particular lease, and stated it was for the abatements and for 3 months. But again, when we submitted this most recent 2020 income for the commercial portion of this assessment, it's $140,000. And upon learning that, the county increased their income from the 183 EGI to the 202,000 that you see now. So that's again one of the big differences here, and I think we were able to supply that information in a timely manner to Chris. And again, with regard to just the total revenue and income for this property, this has been a fairly stable property, but we don't think there's been given enough consideration for the instability of the property and what you're going to see moving forward with the return in terms of, regardless if vacancy looks like it's stabilized, it doesn't, as Greg has testified to, that's not going to equate to higher overall revenue from prior years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, it's just among the board now. Mr. Matzkin.
I just wanted to address being a commercial realtor. It just stuck with me, the discussion of retail. And I'm sure it went down, big player like that, they just didn't pay, they didn't work, they weren't open. The numbers reported are, I'm sure, accurate. But so going to 2019, it seems to me that the department's assessment of 190,000 is too much, because in 2019, it was 171, and then if you escalate it for the next 2 years, 2020, 2021, by probably 2.5%. I guess I could have asked the appellant, but it doesn't matter. Standard is 3, but a heavy hitter like this is probably less than that. The 171,000 becomes about 181,000 for 2021, but there's only one retail space and they're getting a 4% reduction. So it for vacancy and collection. So it doesn't really matter. The department was emphasizing retail, and to me, it's a wash. I was looking therefore at the apartment operating expenses, and I see from the original assessment to the test, the expenses went down, and I wasn't quite sure why that would be, because the vacancy, although collections might be down, the amount of people using elevators and common area and all that stuff that creates these expenses hadn't really changed much. So I, in the back of my mind, is saying, and I was saying, why then from the original assessment did the percentage go down, as well as, of course, the income? So it's a double hit on expenses. But I think the department just took an average of the last 3 years and got it from over 26% to less than 26%. So I would be flexible on increasing that operating expense just a little bit, but they're not very big numbers as a percentage. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
Right, I will jump in. I mean, I don't, I know we don't like to jump around from column to column, but, when I look at this initially, when I look at, 2017, 18, 19, actually the original assessment was right on par with those years. Then having received the operating, income information for 2020, the revision did go down. Yes, it's ironic that the retail went up, the apartments went down. But I look at this, I don't have as much angst on this as I did on the previous case. I look at the difference, it's within $30,000 of what was reported. So I'm fine with the revision on this one. I don't know what other people feel, but this one, like I said, doesn't give me as much angst as the previous case. Mr. Lawson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I did exactly what you did. The difference is, 30,000. And so I'm good with the revision.
Yeah, me too. I took a look at the retail and made an adjustment, but the difference was very low. So I think the county's close enough.
All right. Anyone else different, Mr. Penranda?
Yeah, I did the same on this, and I even went further I did 3 separate tests in different ways, to be honest, but the difference that it comes up with is very minimal to really make any further changes. So I'm okay with the revised.
Okay. All right, then I will move to accept the county's revised assessment of 42,799,400.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, it would be a reduction for the county's proposing.
Right, but it's the county's revised number.
Yeah, right, but we are reducing the. Sorry.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Lawson. All in favor of the county's revised number? Aye. Okay, that is six to zero. So it's reduced to the county's revised number of 42,799,400. And then just to clarify my math and counting on the first case, it actually, the count was 4-1, not 5-1 that I called because Miss Hogan was not able to get back in. Okay. All right, the third case on the agenda is Economic Unit 2900102A. Mr. Warren has asked for that to be withdrawn late yesterday. I assume there's no objection from the county.
No objection.
Okay, then I'll move to accept the withdrawal. Do I have a second? Mr. Lawson, all in favor of accepting the withdrawal? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, 6 to 0, that's accepted. And then we will move along to the fourth and final case on the agenda, which is RPC 1401405A is an Apple on North Stafford Street. So again, Mr. Warren, if you want to start and tell us about the property.
Before we start that, can I just get clarification on the last withdrawal? That'll revert the assessment to the revised number. Is that correct? Or is that something that has to be voted on because the revised is lower? We were at the position to accept the revised number on the last case. So we're in agreement with the.
Mr.
You
Bailey?
need to sign the letter and send it in. And it'll be revised.
So do we need to? Okay. But now we had this happen before. Now that the board has commented on this, we had one of those where we accepted, but it said it can't be, you can't override the board's decision. So could we actually have that previous case? We don't want to withdraw. We're just agreeing. We're agreeing with the county's position of the revised.
Okay, well, first off, then you don't send an email in asking to withdraw the case, and you would start the case and say, you know, we'll accept the revised column and see if there's discussion.
Right.
So
that's our fault.
Right.
That's what I thought we were doing. I
okay, that's not what you were doing. And did you? I think you listened to me. I said they asked to withdraw. So, all right, having voting on the prevailing side of the last vote, I'll motion to bring that last case back up. Do I have a second to do that? Okay. Motion a second by Mr. Matzkin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so revisiting Economic Unit 2900102A is an Apple. Just for the essence of time, the appellant would like to accept the revised county's number. I assume that the county has no objection to.
We do not object to the board accepting the county's proposed assessment for 2021.
All right, so let me just make sure I have the correct number. So the correct number, Mr. Bailey, just to confirm, is 41,427,000 even?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Okay, so I will move to accept the county's revised number of 41,427,000 even for this economic unit. Do I have a second? Mr. Lawson. All in favor of accepting that?
Aye.
Okay. So it's 6 to 0. The county's revised number of 41,427,000 has been confirmed. Okay. The fourth and final case is RPC 1401405A is an Apple on North Stafford Street. Mr. Warren, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Thank you. Our summary facts can be found on page 101 of 181 for this property. This is the Richmond Square Apartments located at 900 North Randolph Street. It is comprised of 5 tax parcels and one economic unit 1401405A. The current assessment for 2021 was $127,930,000. The board is recommending a value, excuse me, the county is recommending a revised value to the board of $124,680,300. The requested value we are requesting is $112,320,900, which is $312,000 a unit. This is a high-rise mixed-use apartment. It's located in the Ballston, Virginia Square submarket. It's 19 stories high and offers a mix of 1, 2, and 2-bedroom units, as well as street-level retail. If you turn to page 3, we'll come to our mixed-use income and expense summary. Again, similar to the last couple of properties that we've discussed today, prior to COVID, this was a very stable property in its operations. Gross potential income reported dating back to 2017 was $9,839,000. That increased to $9,897,000 for 18, up to $10,319,000 for 19, and total of $10,379,996. So even the gross potential income is maintained and stayed relatively flat. Now, with regard again to the vacancy, what you've seen is in prior years, dating back to 2017, again very relatively stable vacancy and concessions at 5% from 2017 to 2019, and you've seen that increase. Vacancy increased basically from 3% to 9% from 2019 to 2020, and total vacancy and collections up to 10.75%. So you've seen the effective gross income decrease pretty substantially from $9.98 million in 2019 to $9,263,908. Now, in the county's revised test column that you'll find on the columns F1 and F2, they're still well above the gross potential, excuse me, the effective gross income for this property of, they're approximately at $9.5 million, $9,555,000 approximately. So they're still well above $250,000 above the effective gross income for this property that was reported in 2020 prior to COVID or during COVID. And the same with regard to the operating expenses. The county's initial estimate used a combined operating expenses of 28% for both the retail and apartment portions. The actual operating expenses were almost 30.5%. And in their test column, the county revised that upward slightly to 29.78%, so not quite there. Again, operating expenses have been fairly stabilized over the course of the last 4 years, 28% in 17, 29% in 18, and 28% again in 2019. Again, when you look at the prior one and looking at the county's test column and it being fairly aligned with regard to the most recent reporting year, this is one that doesn't quite match up to that. You look at the final NOI reported for 2020, which is $6,445,000, which again is down from $7,238,617 from the prior year. You'll see the county's revised column in F1 and F2, when you combine both the commercial and apartment portions, the revised NOI is $6,698,728. So we're approximately still $250,000 above in the county's test column after they received the 2020 financials for this property. So that's the main difference. There's a large gap here, and again, as we've talked about historically, this has been a very stabilized property. And if 2020 had been a normal year, I think maybe that revised test column would be supported. However, as you've seen, the substantial decrease in total revenue, total NOI from the prior year, as well as what Greg has previously testified to with regards to vacancy and total revenue and what they expect in the coming years, the trend that we're going to see that's been caused by COVID, I think their test column is a little aggressive. Chairman, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add.
There is, and then I want to kick it to Greg for a second, but 17 and 18 are very stable. There's a large bump in 19, and then it came back down to earth in 20. And it seems like that 19 is being given as much weight as 20 is. The big issue here is that vacancy and collection losses are up. And we all know that. We all know that COVID had impacts. But Greg, if you could speak to the specifics of what happened here and why we're seeing this, because we're looking at this on a property specific situation.
Yeah, I mean, this property, it's got 360 units, so it's a fairly large property, but it's in a space in between, as a lot of our properties are, the Waycroft, the Origin, JSOL, a lot of the lease ups that were going on last year, all these deliveries. And what happened was COVID, so there was a massive amount of move outs. And then, as we spoke to earlier, for me to get any kind of occupancy, the Waycroft was offering 3 months off plus free parking for a year. JSOL was offering 3 months off, free parking for a year, $750 move-in credit, a designer credit of $1,500. And when you add it all up, you were at 4 and 5 months free for them to get their lease up done. And so a place like Richmond Square with a lot of units, amenities that are great, but not what those folks are delivering. The value that we had to provide for a prospect was significant. So again, you're talking units that might have been in the $1,800 to $2,100 range for a 1-bedroom at $1,495 with concessions. And so rent loss, concessions, and vacancy at this property specifically, one of the hardest hit we had. So I could keep going about the competition and how it affects all these properties, but this one specifically was very, very tough.
The key is that that's the new normal. So what happened in 19 isn't really relevant anymore because of not just COVID, but also because of that direct competition around this property. So it's not just a look, everybody's stuck with COVID. It's there's a new normal in this area, in this immediate submarket. And this immediate submarket for that price point that they were getting in 2019 now gets you so much more. And that's the key. And we can't just say, well, but you got that in 19, so that's all. That's what's driving this. And that's basically what the assessor's done in the test column. They're saying that the income here is $6.7 million and the income was $6.4 million. And next year it's going to be below $6.4 million. We're not getting back to 7.2 just because we were there 2 years ago, unless something catastrophic happens to those 4 other properties and COVID disappears tomorrow. So that's all that I have. Blake, did you have one more thing? Just saw a text. Yeah, okay.
Oh, no.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bailey for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So when we value this property, we took the same approach that we normally take when we value any other apartment property. We look at the 3-year history. So in the original assessment, yes, we did look at 2017, 18, and 19. But as you can see, our GPI was well below what was achieved in 2019. Our EGI was well below what was achieved in 2019. And our NOI was well below what was achieved in 2019. So we did not put all of the weight on 2019, but we did consider it, which is standard when we value any apartment property. When you look at the test, again, we made some revisions to the apartment rent based off information received. The apartment revenue that was projected for the original assessment was reduced by about $20,000 based off the information that Mr. Cheek received. The combined EGI is reduced slightly based off this information after we applied our 5% vacancy to the apartment and 4% vacancy to the commercial component. Expenses were increased. The expenses that we use on a dollar basis is much higher than what they've achieved in the last 4 years. So we're not focused solely on the percentage, the expense percentage. We're looking at the actual dollar amount. We're at 2.8 million or a little bit higher. So that's higher than 2020, higher than 2019, higher than 2018, and higher than 2017. Our NOI in the proposed revision is in line with 2017 and 18 numbers. So again, all the weight is not placed on 2019. The original assessment did reflect a little bit higher than 2017 and 18, but as you see, the 2021 revision based off of the 2020 numbers is a substantial decrease, which is consistent to 17 and 18. Based off of this information we provided, we reduced the assessment, combined assessment, from 127,930,100 to 124,680,300. I don't think I really have much else to add to the case. I mean, we could talk about the rent, the retail rent that they're reporting compared to what they actually have on the rent roll, which was provided to Mr. Chicas via email on page 7. But I think the reduction that we're proposing is a reasonable reduction, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board members? Mr. Metzgen.
This is a question for the appellant. I heard, and it makes sense, that rents went down in 2020 per month. And you also include some concessions in terms of rent abatements. But I look at column E and compare it to A, B, and C, and it looks like you were, modestly healthy, up over 1%. I was wondering if you could comment on your statement that things were way off, but yet the bottom line is you did a little bit better than historically.
Let me start on that. So there's two ways to look at how you want to report your rents. You could say that my rents are $2,000 a month and I'm getting 6 free months, giving 6 months away, or you could say my rents are $1,000 and I'm not giving any rents away. If you do the first option, the county will say, okay, your rents are $2,000, but everybody gets 5%, so everybody gets 5%. Use the second option, the county say, okay, it's $1,000, everybody gets 5%. So the number that really is the most important here isn't the gross potential number, which is potential. It's if things change. It's the effective gross, which is dollars in pocket. So our dollars in pocket went from 9.9 to 9.2. So that's the big number. The big number is the EGI column, which is how much money did I actually get at the end of the day versus how much money, if everything went right in a perfect world, could I potentially get? And those are the differences between those numbers. And I don't know if Greg or Sophie want to add on to that, but basically GPI is an accounting function and EGI is dollars in the bank.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that, Jeremy. I've never totally understood GPI. I've always thought we should just start with EGI and work from there. But yeah, that's on you guys. But yeah, I will say that property, that the 2020, 2021 trend, unfortunately, 2019 is an outlier. Like that, those days aren't coming back. This property, and I mean, I know all these are recorded, so we just play this back next year. It will be worse next year.
Okay. All right. Other questions, Mr. Yates?
To the county, I really what I hear them saying, and looking at the numbers and their numbers, is that not only the impact of COVID, but also increased in the market competition. Is that a factor that, and I know that's hard to look at, but you guys do see what's coming into the market and the other properties. Is that a factor that you look at in this at all?
To be honest, I mean, we know that more units are coming online, but we can't really project how they'll impact the rest of the existing units. For one, a lot of them aren't completed until mid-year. So some of these newer properties that he's referring to, I mean, we go out and inspect these properties throughout the year. A lot of them were valued as not substantially complete, but partially complete because they're still under construction. So without being able to predict when these properties will come online, I mean, we can't put a whole lot of weight on how many units are going to come to the market during 2021. We also can't predict how many people are moving into the county to take up those new units that are coming online. It's a assumption that only people that lives in the county are going to look at these new units, when that's not correct. I mean, people moving into Arlington are also looking at these units. So it's not necessarily we lose one because they got one type situation, how they're painting it out to be. And that's the best way I can explain it. Sorry.
Okay.
Can we respond to that?
Yes.
Greg, do you want to address that? Because look, just because they didn't know what the impact would be didn't make the impact any less on the valuation date. I think that's the key. Is, well, we didn't know it would be as bad as it was, but now we know it was as bad as it was, and we're looking back at the numbers and say the numbers dropped by, in this case, $700,000 in NOI because it was as bad as we're saying it was. So just because they didn't know that they didn't know the impact of it, didn't mean that an investor didn't know it as of the date. If you're going to go buy this property and you know as of that date, okay.
We got it. Okay. Other questions from board members? No? Okay, Mr. Bailey, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Okay, so as the board knows and the appellant knows, when you do assessments on properties, you look at potential gross income. So that's why the GPI or PGI is important, because once you have that number, you also apply the vacancy rate to that. And the vacancy collection rate is derived off of the potential gross income number. So let me just put that out there, because there was some discussion about how to report these numbers. When you look at this history, I mean, the original assessment, the test sheet is less than what they reported, GPI standpoint, 19 and 2020. Yes, there was a spike in 2020 in the vacancy, but if you look at the 3-year history before 2020, our numbers on the original assessment and even on the test are in line. We don't take 2020 and just apply a cap rate to it. I mean, that's not the assessment process. So the test or the proposed revision, I mean, it's in line with the history of this property. And we believe that the revised value should be what we're proposing of 124, 680, 300. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Warren, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Mr. Lee, if you don't mind.
Mr. Chitler.
Is that okay? Obviously COVID had a major impact to this property. The 3-year average, as the owners testified, is completely irrelevant in this because the market has changed dramatically. When this property was one of the better properties in it, is now it dropped down in almost a full class because there's so much more for the prices they were charging. So to use 19, but the fact is 19 was the anomaly. If you look at the 4-year history, that 19 was a year that's not coming back. The fact that last year you can't consider COVID, and then this year say, well, we see COVID, but the 3-year average. There's no 3-year average with COVID. We can't average how many COVID cases there have been in the last 3 years, because that's not going to give a true picture of where we are today. The same thing in this apartment building, plus those new buildings. Any investor on evaluation day is going to say, there's 5 new buildings directly around this one that's offering this. This is what I can get, and that's what we have to do. And the county basically playing naive, saying, well, we didn't know the true impact of it, so we couldn't consider it. They know it now, and they knew when they did the revised test, yet they did a revised test that's $250,000 higher than the calendar year 2020, with the assumption that everything's going to magically return, when we're already telling you that as of the evaluation date, we knew things were worse. As of today, we knew things are worse. And as of last year, we knew things were worse. So next year, 2020 is going to be the better of the 2 years, but we don't need next year to see that. We can look at the 2020 right now and determine that that's a good figure to use, consistent with how the first case went.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's just among the board members. What do people think? Mr. Hoffman?
I'm looking at this building just kind of like the first case for today, where I would look at the 2020 numbers and cap that, and come up around 120 million, use that for the year and see how things go.
Mr. Lawson?
Yes, ma'am. However, you can't cap the operating year because it's not broken down. So what I did, Greg, is I took the apartments and I added back the 100,000, and then I did that cap and ended up 120,011,400. Because I think just like you, I think this is exactly the same as the first case. And the county did a great job, but still didn't quite go far enough, is my opinion.
Mr. Yates. Wait, I'm sorry. Can I just back up though? I just want to clarify on Mr. Lawson. So you got the 120,011,400 and then you added the 1.4423?
No, what I did is I took the G1 column and I added back to that 100,000, and then I applied the county.
I'm sorry, the G1?
G1. The appellant pro forma added back 100,000 and then used the cap rate because the operating year is not broken down.
Right.
And my check to make sure that was a good way to do it is that I'm within 4,000 of the operating year.
Okay. I'm not sure I agree with that, but I'll let Mr. Yates speak,
Okay.
and then I'll tell you I'm close to what you did, but go ahead, Mr.
Okay.
Yates.
Unlike the first case, which I think this has a lot more merit because of the volume of new units coming into the market that I don't think was accounted for. And I'm sorry I didn't ask exactly how many units that was that's now entered the market and changed those dynamics. But I think we're on the right direction. And Mary, I'm interested in what your numbers came out.
Yeah, mine is just slightly higher. What I did is I was working off of the F1 and F2, the county's revised numbers. And I actually took, because the difference between those combined numbers and the actual, it's I think the appellant said it was like 252,000. I reduced the apartments by 200,000 and ended up at like 6.3 and change, and then capped it out. And when I added back the retail, I end up at 120,942 even.
Yeah, I was around that 200,000 also.
So I don't know what Mr. Matzkin or Mr. Penaranda, what do you?
Yeah, can I ask you where you said you deducted 200,000 from the NOI on the apartments?
Mm-hmm.
Where did the 200 come from?
Well, I knew you would be the one that would say, where, to me, I don't care where it comes from. I mean, you can reduce the effective gross income, you can reduce, I'm not going to say to add it to expenses, but to me, the bottom line is the bottom line, and that's my test. When I look at that and I think the combined, not looking at the historical and certainly not looking at 2019, I've got the original assessment, the combined NOI is 6.8, the actual was 6.4, and the test went to 6.6. I think the test was too high. So to me, it doesn't matter to me where you take it from. I think the bottom line, that's why I said I started with an NOI. So I don't have the clear cut. I know you like a nice number of where it came from, but I'm fine with it. Just
well, it's not that I like a nice number. I just want numbers that we could justify.
I don't mean that in a negative.
Right.
But I guess I could say, I'll reduce the GPI by 200,000. So, it trickles down. But to me, whether you take it as a combination off of, parking, other rubs, it doesn't matter to me. I just thought the test was still too high. So it might be arbitrary, but go ahead. Mr. Matzkin, you.
Yeah, I'm following it, and I like Mary's analysis because although we can't pick a precise number and defend it, we can look at the overall numbers. And it seems to me that the GPI or EGI, either one, are too low and are too high and ought to be reduced. And is it 190,000 or 210,000? I don't know, but just want to get the right nomenclature. The vacancy and collections were extraordinary for a quality building for 2020. And I don't think that we should just wholesale take it. I certainly support the guideline from the county, but to offset that big difference between the guideline and the actuals in 2020, I think the income ought to be reduced. And I wouldn't take it from parking. The same amount of people are there. It's just that they're paying less rent.
Right.
So I would support either of your two conclusions, Mark's or Mary's, but I like Mary's just a tad better.
Mr. Lawson?
Yes, I like Mary's better too. I experimented with about, I don't know, 5 different ways. And having listened to you, Madam Chairman, I think your analysis using the county's setup is probably better than my own. So I'll go with your figure.
All right. Are you okay, Mr. Hoffman?
Yeah, I was right around 120 million, 125 anyway. So,
Okay. All right, then I will move to reduce to 120,942 even, and that is based on the county's test column, leaving the retail alone, and on the apartments, reducing the GPI by 200,000. And so that portion would end up at 119,499.7.
a second.
Do I have a second? Okay, a motion, a second by Mr. Hoffman. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so it is 5-1 without Mr. Penaranda. Okay, so that is 129.42. So did you get that, the breakdown? The county, Mr. Bailey?
What was the, no, I didn't, sorry. Commercial,
so
the total value is what? 120 what?
120,942 even, so that puts the apartments at 119,499.7.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so, and that was 6-1. Okay, so that completes the agenda. I just want to ask, before we lose the Mr. Warren and Mr. Chitlick, so on the withdrawal that you've asked for tomorrow, is that a withdrawal or do you want to accept?
In that case, there's no revised value, so
Okay.
it's
So
kind
it's a
of
straight withdrawal.
Yeah.
Okay, I just didn't
Correct.
want to have what happened today repeat tomorrow. I was going to let you
Yeah,
withdraw your withdrawal if that was the case. So.
and I apologize. It's probably my wording. In my wording to
Oh yeah, when you say
Rosa yesterday, I
withdraw,
say
Rose's
accept.
ears light up.
Okay, but also in there it said, like, I think the title of my email was accept recommended value, but then we also say pursuant to that we would like to withdraw.
All right.
But I'll note moving forward.
Which case
All
is
right,
that?
well, thank you both. Okay, so then just for the rest of the board members for tomorrow, one, I would suggest that you print the grids out because they're all in the packages sideways, and you'll be trying to read them on your computers. But both the first case from Mr. Kinney has withdrawn, and then the first case, which is number 2 on the agenda for Mr. Warren, is withdrawn. So we'll just have items 3 and 4 on the agenda for tomorrow. Okay, any other business from either county or Mr. Matzkin?
Thank you.
No, I have it just a housekeeping after we go offline.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
All right, thank you.
Oh, I guess I should say we'll re-adjourn tomorrow. Okay.
It says
Mr. Matzkin.
recording is still on. It says has started. Rosa, are we still recording?
Give me just 1 minute. It takes a little bit to stop.